Senator Coons, I have the privilege of asking you just a couple questions before we shift to the panel. And what occurred to me when I was listening is in the spirit of the McClendon series that we are part of, the essence of its purpose is to have all of us be capable of engaging more effectively in the issues of our day. And clearly you shared with us the challenges that you experience about partisanship in the Senate, but here's the question that occurred to me. In days when our politics were more coming from our better angels, we had lots of members of Congress that really cared more about the country than they cared about party. And we now have been watching for quite a period of time when at least those of us who can see what we see, it appears that a very large critical mass of members care more about party than they do about country. So when you see a group of engaged citizens that are here in this room, what thoughts do you have about anything we could do to influence those members that represent us to once again put country above party?
Thank you. I wish I had a great answer for that great question. Two things. First, don't settle. One of the things that stuns me is the casual frequency with which elected officials at all levels seem perfectly comfortable talking about their own re-election as if that's the most important goal they have to achieve. Why did you vote this way, Senator? Well, of course, I have to win my primary. Why did you vote this way, Senator? Well, I have to get re-elected. Since when was that our number one job? Or number two or number three? First. So I think you should push back when you hear someone at any level citing their own continuation of employment as the principal reason for a decision. Second, we should all think about how we describe and talk to and about each other. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I bet you if I asked truthfully, how many of you have recently described someone of the opposite party as crazy, it'd be 2/3 of the room.
And probably today.
It might have been this morning. We describe our partisan opponents in terms that have gotten sharper and sharper. We don't just question their policy priorities, we question their motives. We don't just question their motives, we question their stability and sanity. It's pretty hard to have a conversation with someone who doesn't just disagree with you, but who questions your motives and even your sanity. I think we've got a long road back towards being in a place where the Congress works as designed and intended. The country's made it through much harder times than this. I've spent a lot of time thinking about Lincoln in the last year and a half for exactly that reason. We've made it through world wars, a civil war, depressions, huge changes in our society. We will survive this. But the question is, will we ever get back to a place of robust civil discourse and respect for each other? I think it is in exactly this kind of discourse that we may find that. I know my remarks this evening really spoke to a particular view of Christianity from my particular background and training. But I don't think that's the only path. I think there are other ways, rooted in faith or rooted in reason, that allow us to find our path back towards each other. Last point, and this is borrowed from Ben Sass, a Republican colleague and friend of mine, who just wrote a book to this point. In some ways, we are asking for too much of politics, he writes. In a digital age where real relationships have become too attenuated, we're looking for tribal identity, for red and blue jerseys, and we're over-investing in partisan politics, and we'd be better to put down some of those tools and look for meaning by connecting in local communities, and then expect of the folks in Congress that they'll maybe solve difficult problems, and we'll forgive them when they cross the aisle and surprise and disappoint us.
Thank you. One more question. One of the things that was so engaging about your talk with us was how much you shared some stories about your own experience in the Senate. And I'm making, I think, a pretty comfortable guess here that the vast majority of the people in this room haven't yet forgiven Lindsey Graham for what he did during the Kavanaugh hearings. And I wondered if you shared the rest of that story of how the two of you reconnected, if it might help some of the rest of us move past a place we got stuck.
Well, that's a story that's not yet. There's still some work to be done.
So we maybe shouldn't feel too bad.
You shouldn't feel too bad. Look, here's the difference, I think. As I've had some very sharp or difficult conversations about this with my colleagues in my caucus, my party, it's my job to get back to work, to find a way forward. Lindsey's not just, Senator Graham of South Carolina is not just a random colleague. He is the next chairman of the Judiciary Committee. He is someone with whom I hope and expect to do important work on criminal justice reform, on immigration, on privacy, and frankly, most centrally, sustaining billions of dollars of investment in foreign aid around the world that our president is relentlessly trying to end. And so there is good and important work right in front of us. Our last conversation was about a big, bold, bipartisan criminal justice reform bill that wouldn't be where it is without his support. If I didn't feel I had a job I had to do, and that job involves getting back to a place of working with him and being able to respect him, I probably would nurse this grudge for, a couple more years. But exactly why I went where I went in my remarks tonight was I'll just be blunt. I can't forgive Lindsey Graham on my own. I can't. I will never get over that. I wasn't watching this on TV. I was 10 feet away. Faith and looking at the two of us from a kingdom perspective is what gives me the opportunity to forgive. I traveled to South Africa with Polly Shepard, who was one of the two survivors of the Emmanuel AME church shooting. Her Bible is pink because it was drenched in the blood of her murdered relative. We had a remarkable week with John Lewis, with a number of other House members, and with Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, revisiting places that Bobby Kennedy went to 50 years before. If Polly can seriously talk about forgiving Dylan Roof, who on earth am I to hold some grudge against a guy who gave a pointed and I would say unjustified, even nasty speech, of which I was the object? I walked away from the encounter. The larger point I'm trying to make is it's human, it's difficult, it's uncomfortable, it's even unnatural to forgive our enemies. I can't think of a more recent, pointed, and personal example than a woman whose worship place was violated by violence, racially motivated violence. I can't imagine a more hurtful, harmful thing to have to overcome than forgiving the legacy of apartheid. And to have my life touched by the witness of people who have found the courage and the inspiration and the challenge to do that humbles me and grounds me and reminds me that part of my calling is to demonstrate a willingness to forgive as I have been forgiven, even at times in the face of those who don't repent, which theologically should be the precondition towards forgiveness.
On that note, let's again thank Senator Coons from our hearts.
Thank you.